Stories by Ibo Nikana. Leah and the Gymnacat. Leah hated falling. Not the kind of falling where you trip over a shoelace or bump into a desk. She was used to those. She meant the kind of fall that came after a perfect run-up, a perfect takeoff. And then something goes just slightly wrong, like today. She lay sprawled across the spring floor at practice, hair in her face, elbow throbbing lightly where it had hit the mat. She stared up at the gym ceiling and waited for the wave of frustration to hit. There it was. She clenched her jaw as Coach Ava called. "You okay, Leah?" "I'm fine," Leah muttered, pushing herself up onto her hands and knees. But she wasn't. Not really. She'd been working on that aerial for weeks, and it still wouldn't click. Everyone else in her level had nailed it already. Leah knew it was about timing, about trust, about letting her body fly. But every time, her foot came down just a second too soon. By the time she reached the changing room, she was quiet. Even her best friend, Jody, didn't push her into small talk the way she usually did. Everyone could tell Leah was in a mood. She walked home with her hoodie pulled over her head, earbuds in, and nothing playing. She didn't want music. She wanted to feel nothing. The sun had already dipped below the houses when she reached her front door. She slipped inside quietly, hoping Grandma wouldn't ask how practice went. The smell of mashed potato and gravy floated from the kitchen, but Leah wasn't hungry. She tiptoed upstairs and closed her bedroom door behind her with a soft click. Milo was waiting on her bed. He was curled into a tight comma on her favorite pillow, gray and white fur rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. His ears perked up as she entered, and he lifted his head sleepily. "Hey, Floof," Leah said softly. Milo stretched with a dramatic yawn, toes splayed wide, then trotted across the bed toward her. He rubbed against her leg, his tail flicking in content little loops. Leah dropped her bag and collapsed onto the bed, face down. Milo responded by walking directly onto her back and sitting down. "You're lucky you're cute," she mumbled into the covers. After a minute, she rolled over. Milo jumped down and padded onto the rug. Leah sat up, stretching her sore arms. Then, just to prove to herself she still had some control over her limbs, she stood and did a cartwheel across the room. She landed it clean. Of course, no pressure here. She turned to find Milo watching her with those curious golden eyes. "What?" she asked, panting lightly. He blinked. Then, in the most absurd thing Leah had ever seen, Milo ran a few steps forward, launched himself off the edge of the rug, flipped sideways in the air, and landed in a ridiculous sprawl on a heap of laundry. Leah froze. Milo blinked up at her from the pile, head tilted. "Did you just try to cartwheel?" she whispered. Milo gave a soft, smug meow. She stared at him for a long second. Then she laughed. Really laughed. That kind of messy, warm laugh that breaks through a day of grumpiness like sunlight through clouds. "Oh my gosh, you did, didn't you?" she said between snorts. Milo strutted back to her, tail high, as if to say, "Of course I did. I'm amazing." Leah knelt and picked him up, cradling him in her arms like a baby. "Maybe I'm not the only gymnast in the house," she said with a grin. Milo purred and pressed his nose to her chin. The fall still stung. Her elbow still ached. But for the first time all day, something felt light again. Maybe tomorrow, she thought, she'd try again. The next morning, Leah woke up to the sound of thumps. Not the usual kind. Not Milo pawing at her door for breakfast or her gran knocking with a mug of tea. These were more intentional, repetitive, like someone trying to land a jump, but slightly missing the mark. She sat up in bed and blinked away the sleep. The curtains were still drawn, but pale morning light seeped through. She rubbed her eyes and looked toward the sound. Milo was in the middle of the room, perched on her reading chair. He stared at the ottoman in front of him with intense concentration, like it was a rival gymnast, and not just a squishy piece of furniture. He twitched his tail, wiggled his haunches. Then he leapt. His back legs kicked out midair. He landed on the ottoman with a soft whomp, teetered a bit, then sat down as if nothing had happened. Leah blinked. "You've got to be kidding me." Milo looked over his shoulder and gave her that same smug meow he'd used the night before. Leah threw off the covers and crossed the room. That was a jump and a twist. Was that a feline version of a back tuck? Milo blinked again, slowly. She sat on the ottoman beside him. "Okay, maybe you're just energetic. Maybe you're just a cat doing cat things." But that was weirdly on beat. He hopped into her lap and headbutted her chin. Downstairs, she could hear Gran humming along to the radio and the kettle starting to whistle. But Leah wasn't ready to go down yet. She was still watching Milo with new eyes. "All right," she whispered. "Let's test something." She stood up, went to her closet, and dragged out the old tumbling mat she used to practice on when she was younger. It was faded blue with one corner that never quite uncurled. She rolled it out across her bedroom floor and backed up to one end. Milo watched from the windowsill. She did a slow, deliberate cartwheel. Not her best, but clean. She turned back to him and pointed at the mat. "Your turn." Milo flicked his ears, flicked his tail, and then launched himself forward. He didn't exactly do a cartwheel, but he definitely twisted his body mid-air and landed, this time upright. He held the pose, tail high, like a gymnast sticking the landing. Leah's mouth fell open. "Okay," she said. "That's it. We're making you a gym." By that afternoon, Leah had transformed half of her room. She dragged in couch cushions for soft landings. She laid scarves across the dresser like balance beams. She hung a string of fairy lights above her mirror for flair and taped a cut-up ribbon to the floor like a guide. Milo had a training mat now, one of Leah's old yoga pads. She even cut an old sock to make him a bandana, which he immediately tried to eat. "Fashion isn't your strong suit," she said, gently tugging it back off. When Gran poked her head in to ask if she was joining for lunch, Leah just grinned and said, "Milo's in training." Her grandmother gave her a knowing smile. "As long as he's not coaching you, sweetheart." "He's trying," Leah muttered as soon as the door closed again. She spent the rest of the day coaching him like he was a tiny, fuzzy teammate. "Milo, try again. Big jump this time. Remember to spot your landing." He chased the ribbon, leapt off the chair, somersaulted off the pillow mountain, and then collapsed dramatically in a sunbeam with his paw over his face. "Break time," she said, sitting beside him. He purred. Leah flopped onto her back and stared up fairy lights around her room. She thought about the fall at practice. The ache in her elbow was fading, but the frustration was still there, simmering just under her skin. But when she looked at Milo, fast asleep, with a paw twitching like he was dreaming of backflips, she felt something else stir in her chest. Hope. It was just a game. It was just pretend. But for the first time in a long time, gymnastics felt fun again. Not about scores, not about impressing her coach, just her and the flips, and a cat who might actually be training to beat her someday. She grinned. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we add ribbon dancing." By Wednesday, Milo could leap from the desk to the windowsill with the finesse of a trained acrobat. Sort of. He usually knocked over a pencil holder or slipped off the curtains on the way, but Leah counted it as progress. After school that day, she burst through the front door, dumped her bag by the shoe rack, and took the stairs 2 at a time. "Milo," she called. "Where are you?" A muffled thump answered from upstairs, the sound of a cat landing, possibly not where he'd intended to. She found him tangled in the blanket on her bed, looking both guilty and unbothered. "I've got something," she said, out of breath. "You're going to want to see this." She pulled the slightly crumpled poster from her backpack and smoothed it out on the bed. The paper was bright yellow, covered in sparkly lettering and surrounded by star stickers. At the top, it read, "TalentFest, 2025. Talent show, fun for all ages. Bring your sparkle, bring your style. Pets, welcome." Leah looked at Milo. Milo looked at the poster. He batted it once with a paw. "Don't you see?" she said, voice rising with excitement. "We could do this, you and me, on stage." Milo purred and began kneading the blanket. "It's next Saturday," she went on, "at the community center. There'll be judges, lights, probably cake." Her voice drifted as doubt crept in. It was one thing to play around in her room, to pretend Milo was a gymnast and she was his coach/teammate. But going on a real stage, in front of people? She sank onto the bed beside him. "What if we mess up?" she whispered. "What if people think it's stupid?" Milo climbed into her lap and stared up at her with his round golden eyes, the same eyes that had been watching her train, day after day, without ever judging, without ever turning away. He gave a soft, short meow. "Right," she said, stroking his back. "You're not scared." He blinked slowly, as if to say, "Why would I be? I'm a cat." Leah bit her lip. "We'd have to make up a whole routine with music and costumes, and we'd only have," she counted on her fingers, "9 days." Milo climbed up her chest and butted her forehead. Okay. Calm down. Spark plug," she laughed, gently setting him beside her again. "Let's think this through." She stared at the poster for a long moment. The bright colors, the glitter pen someone had used to outline the words "Pets welcome." It was silly, maybe even ridiculous. But maybe it was exactly what she needed. Not a competition, not a team trial, not something her coach would watch with a clipboard. Just fun. Just her. And Milo. And a crowd who didn't know what to expect. She picked up a pencil and scribbled ideas on the back of the flyer. Ribbon entrance. Milo chases. Cartwheel into spin. Vault over cushion tower. Final pose with Milo on shoulder. She sat back and looked at the list. Her heart started to race, but in the best way. "Milo," she said slowly, "I think we're doing this." Milo immediately knocked the pencil off the bed in celebration. They spent the next hour sketching out their routine. Leah even played music on her tablet, a peppy, bouncy tune that made Milo's tail twitch in rhythm. Every time the beat dropped, he would do something chaotic, like leap into a drawer or pounce on the blanket. "Okay," she said, scribbling notes. "Maybe we don't choreograph every second. You're more of an improv guy." Milo gave her a tiny meow in agreement. Just before dinner, Leah ran downstairs, flyer in hand. "Gran?" she asked, peeking into the kitchen. "Can we go to the community center tomorrow? I want to sign up for something." Her grandmother turned from the sink, drying her hands on a tea towel. "Something gymnastic?" "Sort of," Leah said, holding up the bright yellow poster. "It's a talent show. I want to enter." Gran nodded slowly, reading the flyer. "And what's your act?" Leah hesitated. "Me and Milo." There was a pause. Then Gran smiled, that gentle, knowing smile that always made Leah feel a little braver. "Well," she said, "he has been practicing with you. I suppose it's only fair he gets to show off too." Leah beamed. "So, we can go?" "Of course, love. I'll even help you sew something sparkly if you like." Leah felt her heart lift like a balloon. "Thanks, Gran." "You're welcome," her Gran said softly. "And Leah, just remember, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. If it makes you happy, that's the best kind of performance." Leah nodded, squeezing the flyer in her hands. That night, as Leah lay in bed, the poster tacked up on her wall and Milo curled in the crook of her knees, she stared at the stars outside and let herself imagine the lights, the music, the gasps of the crowd. Maybe they'd laugh. Maybe they'd love it. Either way, she knew one thing: she wasn't doing it alone. And for the first time in ages, the idea of stepping into the spotlight didn't make her stomach twist. It made her smile. The next morning, Leah and Milo officially became a team. She wrote TalentFest routine, final version, in bubble letters across the top of a notebook page and underlined it 3 times. Beneath that, she began sketching their routine, complete with little cat, stick figures doing leaps and flips. Milo, of course, helped by sitting on the notebook and chewing the corner. "Creative input, huh?" Leah said, gently nudging him aside. They spent all weekend rehearsing. Leah moved the coffee table out of the living room. She used cushions from the sofa and built a miniature vault using a cardboard box filled with blankets. She even added glittery streamers along the edge. Gran popped in once and raised her eyebrows at the chaos, but she didn't say a word. She just left a tray of toast and apple juice by the door and backed out slowly, as though entering a sacred rehearsal zone. Milo was chaos incarnate. He sprinted through their stage, sending streamers flying. He leapt too early, missed a landing, rolled off a pillow, and ended up inside a laundry basket with a sock on his head. Leah couldn't stop laughing. But sometimes Milo nailed it. He twirled at the exact right moment. He climbed the bookcase and jumped on cue. He even followed Leah in a circle during one of their spins, tail held high like a baton. By Monday, Leah had memorized their music and timed each move to fit. She even had a costume idea, matching blue and silver accents, just enough sparkle to catch the light. But on Tuesday, everything started to wobble. "Isn't that a bit childish?" Jody asked at lunch, frowning at Leah's sketchbook. They were sitting in their usual spot under the tree near the science block, eating cheese sandwiches and crisps. Leah had been showing her the routine, half excited, half nervous. "It's a cat, Leah. You're seriously doing a routine with your cat?" Leah bristled. "Milo's not just a cat. He's been practicing with me for weeks. And TalentFest isn't serious, it's for fun." Jody shrugged. "Yeah, but you're actually good at gymnastics. Shouldn't you be doing something more real, not pet tricks? Leah didn't know what to say. She stuffed the sketchbook back into her bag, suddenly aware of how silly it might look from the outside. A cat, doing a routine, ribbons, pillows. She chewed the inside of her cheek for the rest of lunch, barely tasting her food. That evening, when she got home, she didn't feel like practicing. She lay on her bed, Milo curled beside her, the TalentFest flyer now slightly curled and frayed where she'd tacked it to the wall. What if Jody was right? What if people did laugh? She looked down at Milo, who had one paw draped over his face as he snored. He didn't care what people thought. He leapt anyway. He twirled because it was fun. He didn't have anything to prove. Leah sighed and turned onto her side. I just don't want to make a fool of us, she whispered. What if we mess up? What if it's a disaster? Milo stretched out one leg, accidentally poking her in the chin. She laughed. You're such a dork, she murmured. She sat up slowly and reached for her sketchbook. At the bottom of the routine plan, she wrote in big, messy letters, "We're doing this for us, not for them." Milo jumped off the bed and trotted over to the mat, as if he'd been waiting for the pep talk to end. Leah smiled. All right, champ, she said. Let's get back to work. Leah stood just behind the curtain of the community center stage, trying not to throw up. The TalentFest crowd was louder than she expected. Families, classmates, toddlers, teachers, even a news camera in the back. The room sparkled with fairy lights and star garlands, and the air smelled like popcorn and nerves. She peeked around the curtain. The stage lights glowed soft gold, and the crowd stretched back farther than she'd imagined. Fold-out chairs, parents with phones raised, siblings playing on the floor. It felt like the whole town had shown up. Backstage, kids were buzzing with nervous energy. A boy dressed as a magician whispered fiercely to someone about a missing coin. A girl in a leotard adjusted her ponytail for the 10th time. In the corner, someone was playing a recorder with alarming enthusiasm. On stage now, a Year 7 student named Priya stood tall on a wobble board while playing a violin solo. Her bow moved smoothly as she swayed with the board's tilts, completely focused. Leah watched with a mix of admiration and nerves. The crowd clapped along, and when Priya nailed the final note without falling, the audience erupted into cheers. Then came a duo of brothers performing a slapstick juggling act with plastic clubs and rubber chickens. One slipped and accidentally launched a club into the front row, hitting a teacher's handbag. The crowd roared with laughter. A girl followed, dancing with glowing poi that left neon trails in the air. Then came a boy who sang an off-key but passionate version of Let It Go, complete with hand choreography and a snowflake-patterned cape. Each act added something different: silliness, talent, heart. And now it was Leah's turn. Her name was next on the list. Her hands felt like ice. She clutched the edge of the curtain and took a deep breath. She could see Gran sitting in the front row, proud and still, a quiet anchor in the sea of movement. Beside her, an empty chair was marked with a small handwritten sign that read, "Reserved for pets." Leah had no idea if it was a joke, but it made her smile anyway. She looked down at her gym bag. Milo peeked out, eyes bright, tail flicking lazily. He looked like he'd just woken from a nap and was considering a nap as an encore. He wore his blue and silver bandana, sparkly sequins and all. The announcer's voice crackled through the microphone. Up next, we have Leah. And her cat, Milo? There was a ripple of laughter from the audience, surprised, intrigued. Leah's stomach flipped. But then Milo hopped lightly out of the bag and sat beside her, as if to say, "What are we waiting for?" She took a deep breath, steadied her hands, and stepped into the lights. The moment the music began, Leah moved. She started with a flowing spin, then leapt high into the air, landing with a soft thud on the mat. The audience leaned in. Then Milo made his entrance. He trotted across the stage, tail held high, and chased the end of a glittering ribbon Leah dragged behind her. When she twirled, he spun too. When she vaulted over a pillow block, he clambered up after her and leapt to the other side, sticking the landing with an unintentional dramatic flourish. The crowd gasped. A little boy shouted, "Mommy, the cat's doing tricks!" Leah beamed. They kept going, spins, jumps, a leap through a hula hoop, a dash across the mat in perfect time with the music. Leah flipped, Milo dashed underneath. She held a dramatic pose, and he circled her like a furry satellite. And for their grand finale, Leah stood center stage, arms raised. She gave a short whistle. Milo ran across the mat, sprang from a low box, and landed cleanly on her shoulder. They froze, girl and cat. Breathing hard, glitter catching the light. The music faded. For a second, just one breathless moment, the room was completely silent. Then came the sound Leah would remember forever. Applause. Loud, joyful, genuine. The kind that fills your chest and makes your fingers tingle. Cheers, clapping, whooping. Someone gave a standing ovation. Even the recorder kid dropped his instrument in awe. Later, backstage, Leah sat on the floor with Milo curled beside her in his sparkly bandana. Her legs still felt shaky, but she couldn't stop smiling. Kids she didn't even know were giving her high fives as they passed. One girl leaned down and whispered, "I've never seen anything that cool in my life." "Best thing all night," another kid said. Gran arrived a few minutes later, her coat draped over one arm, her eyes a little misty. "Well," she said, kneeling beside them, "that was something truly special." Leah grinned, cheeks flushed pink. "He was amazing." Gran reached out and scratched behind Milo's ears. "You both were." At the end of the night, the judges returned to the stage with a table full of sparkly trophies and ribbons. The violin wobbleboard girl won Best Musical Talent. A boy who did karate with glow sticks got Best Stage Presence. Then one of the judges stepped forward. "And finally," she said, "for the act that reminded us what performance is really about, fun, creativity, and a little chaos, the Spirit of TalentFest award goes to Leah and Milo." Leah's breath caught. Gran gave a delighted clap as Leah walked to the stage with Milo balanced on her shoulder. She accepted the ribbon, smiling so hard it hurt. Milo meowed at the mic, and the crowd laughed all over again. She didn't care that it wasn't first place. It was better. It was theirs. The night sky was deep blue and velvety by the time Leah and Gran stepped out of the community center. Leah carried her ribbon in one hand and Milo in the other, wrapped snug in a blanket. Stars blinked above them. The town felt calm again, quieter, like it had exhaled. Gran drove them home, with the windows slightly cracked, letting in the cool night air. Leah was still buzzing with excitement and was talking nonstop about how she felt the evening went for the entire journey. When they got home, she set the ribbon on her shelf, right between a trophy from last year's team meet and a photo of her first gymnastics class. It glittered in the dim room, catching the light from her fairy lights. Somehow, it seemed to shine even brighter than the gold medals. Milo jumped up onto the bed and flopped over with a dramatic sigh. Leah laughed softly. "I know, bud. Big night." She changed into pajamas and curled up beside him. For a while, they just lay there. No music, no talking, just the quiet hum of the house and the distant hoot of an owl outside. Her muscles ached. Her cheeks still held the echo of her smile. And her heart, that felt full. Not because they'd won a ribbon, but because she'd done something brave. Something just for herself. No scores, no judging panels, no pressure. Just her and her cat. A stage, a leap, a laugh. She rolled onto her back and looked at the stars out the window, glowing faintly. "You know," she said quietly, "for a while there, I forgot why I even loved gymnastics. I was so busy trying to be perfect." Milo shifted beside her, his tail curling around her wrist. "But tonight," she paused. "It was fun again," I remembered. Milo gave a sleepy little chirp. Leah smiled. "Thanks for flipping with me, Milo. You're the best teammate I've ever had." He didn't reply, just curled in closer, soft fur warm against her side. She reached out and flicked off the lamp. The room fell into gentle darkness, the stars above glowing, the ribbon still sparkling faintly across the room. And as her eyes drifted shut, one thought followed her into sleep like a whisper. This was only the beginning.